I see you, I feel you. There is how I know you. Go on. Far across the distance and spaces between us, you have come to show you. Go on. Near, far, wherever you are, I believe that the heart does go on. Once more, you open the door, and you hear in my heart, and my heart will go on and on. Love can touch us one time and last for a lifetime, and never let go till we're gone. Love's when I loved you one true time. I hold you in my life will always go on. Near, far, wherever you are, I believe that the heart does go on. Once more, you open the door, and you hear in my heart, and my heart will go on and on. Oscar, go ahead. You're here. There's nothing I feel, and I know that my heart will go on. We'll stay forever this way. You are safe in my heart, and my heart will go on
Buenas a todos, guapísimo el cover y vamos a hablar un poco sobre los supervivientes del Titanic. He encontrado un canal muy interesante, que tiene grabaciones de supervivientes del Titanic, ¿no? Y los entrevistaron, pues, no sé en qué año, pero hace bastante. La mayoría, pues, eran personas, eran jóvenes, ¿no? Y bueno, voy a hablar un poco despacio y no sé si el volumen bajarlo un poco hasta las 12, ¿vale? Porque no quiero molestar ni a los vecinos ni a los compañeros. Pero bueno, vamos, las entrevistas son en inglés, pero están traducidas al español. Y vamos yo no las he visto, por eso quería hacer directo y verlas en directo, para que no sea repetitivo. Y bueno, pues a ver qué nos cuentan y comentamos por el chat si queréis. Como ya os digo, no voy a hablar mucho porque a las 12 ya no quiero molestar a los compañeros. Y bueno, hay mucha conspiración sobre el Titanic, ¿no? Sobre lo que pasó, ¿no? Lo que sí no nos tenemos que fiar es de la versión oficial, ¿no? Para mí, ya que un iceberg, que el hielo rompa el acero, luego no le echan la culpa al acero, le echan la culpa a los remaches, que al parecer era la acción de hierro y acero, o que solo el Titanic solo era de acero en la parte de la mitad, y los dos extremos eran de la acción de acero y hierro fundido. Se han hecho experimentos científicos a escala, ¿no? Del impacto de acero contra el hielo, y la verdad es que ni se roza, ¿no? Y bueno, pues las teorías estas de conspiración nos dicen que a mí me parece lógico, la verdad, que murieron banqueros, gente rica como el empresario el JP Morgan, que bueno, que pudo ser algo planeado bueno, pues eliminar a esta persona, luego lo de la Reserva Federal, que si pusieron bombas, que no fue... Bueno, colisión tuvo que haber porque los testigos sí que nombran la colisión, pero que justo cuando colisionó lo hicieron explotar, pues también es posible, ¿no? Esas imágenes que nos muestran del barco hundido, que donde está el hueco está sacado para afuera en vez de para adentro, ¿no? Hace que pensar, ¿no? Y bueno, pues luego sacaron la película, una película preciosa, muy bien hecha, para mí es de las mejores películas del mundo, la banda sonora igual. Y bueno, pues vamos a dar ya paso a los testigos, a los supervivientes, y a ver qué nos cuentan, ¿vale? Yo no los he visto, pero me he topado con este canal ayer y digo, pues me parece interesante a ver qué dicen, y voy a hacer un directo a ver qué cuentan. Venga, vamos a ver esta mujer en el 57.
I believe you were in charge of the Turkish bath on the Titanic.
I was.
And where were you when the iceberg hit the ship?
I was in bed.
And when did you first realize things were wrong?
Well, naturally, the fog woke us up, and everybody got to their feet. And I went into a little passage, and I met the second steward, which was Mr. Dodd, and he said, "For God's sake, get some clothes on, get up on deck." I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "I don't know." So, of course, I had a coat on, a nightdress, and we got up on deck, and everybody was most fearful.
When did you first realize how serious things were?
I didn't think it was serious because I didn't think it was possible a big ship like that could sink. And everybody was busy, and they was lowering the lifeboats, and the crew were marvelous. Everybody was cheerful.
And how did you escape?
In the last lifeboat, and I didn't want to go.
And then, of course, you realized that things were very serious.
Yes, I did.
And did you see the ship sink?
I did. It sank very quickly.
That must have been the most dramatic sight.
It was, because you could just see the lights going down and down.
Did you hear the music playing
I did.
almost till the end?
Till the end, I heard them play, you know, Nearer My God to Thee.
Nearer My
they were
God to
playing.
Thee.
And I met.
Ya esto que dice que se hundió muy rápido el barco, y según la versión oficial dice que se hizo una pequeña raja y se fue abriendo, se fue abriendo, se fue abriendo por culpa de los remaches que eran aleación de hierro fundido, y así se hundió. Pero aquí nos cuenta la superviviente que se hundió muy rápido. Entonces tuvo que haber un hueco muy grande para que entrara el agua muy rápido, ¿no? Así que le doy veracidad al tema de explosivos, que puede ser lo más factible, ¿no? En mi opinión, ¿vale?
I met a steward and he said, "You grab hold of this." And it was a baby. So I took the baby. And then when they lowered the last lifeboat, I didn't want to go. And they said that one of the other stewards, and Mr. Wheat, he was helping lower them, and Mr. Murdoch, he was the chief steward, and he was shouting out, "Ladies, children and women first." They was marvellous.
And you took the baby?
I took the baby, and I didn't want to go, so they said, "Come on." And I went down in the last lifeboat, and I think there were 72 in it. And two of the stewards manned the boat.
And which ship rescued you?
Carpathia.
The Carpathia.
And she was full, of course.
Otra cosa que no sabía es que cuando fabricaron el Titanic, fabricaron otros 2 barcos iguales. Que uno se llamaba el Olympic y el otro el Britannic. No lo sabía. 3 barcos iguales, y el que se hundió fue el Titanic. Y el Britannic, yo no sé, el Olympic yo creo que zarpó también con él o algo así. Y en el momento del hundimiento había más barcos, unos pescadores y otro barco que les podían haber ayudado y no los ayudaron, ¿vale? Al igual que no tenían las bengalas de aviso y tenían de otro color, y bueno, muchas historias, ¿no?
Was going on the Mediterranean cruise.
And you brought the baby safely back with you?
No, when we got on the ship, the Italian doctor called out that anybody can help. So they had big jars of, well, only that the stewards of the Carpathia were waiting there with brandy and hot blankets for the survivors. And then, of course, there wasn't much space for us. We had to go where we could, and the kindness of some of the people which was going the Mediterranean cruise helped out with letting us, sleep.
When you first went up on the deck of the Titanic, does anything stand out in your memory?
Only that everybody was most cheerful, and everybody was helping one another and trying to do what they could. They never thought it was so serious.
What did you take with you?
Well, my clothes?
Of your personal things?
Nothing at all.
No.
I went back to get some personal things that I had, some money and stuff, but the water was coming down the stairs, so I had to go back.
You saw the water?
Oh, yes, coming down the gangways, they call it. So I went back, and everybody was up on deck then.
How long were you on deck before you got in the lifeboat?
About an hour.
And then how long were you at sea before you were rescued?
It was about 2 o'clock, I think. It was near about 2 o'clock when we was picked up. Then we floated round all night in the lifeboats. And then we was picked up by the Carpathia. You see, she couldn't come nearer to us. We had to go to them, you see, on account of wanting to sink. And you could hear the ice crash in the sides of the boats.
You saw ice all around you?
Oh, yes, crashing. And the water, the ocean was as smooth as a pond.
And you were in the water you were in the boat until daylight?
Yes, quite daylight. And then we was brought on to New York, and the Lapland brought us back to Plymouth. the survivors, which had to come back. So then, of course, we was kept there a little while and then brought on to Southampton. Of course, that was very sad because everybody thought you knew somebody who was lost, and I had so many friends on there, and you couldn't tell them anything.
And then you yourself went back to sea.
Yes,
You went back
Yes.
with the White Star Company.
yes. I made what they call a Mediterranean cruise. Then I was a little while, and then I gave it up and come out of this country to live.
To live here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Slocum.
Okay.
Where were you when the iceberg struck the ship?
I just retired.
And did you realize that something serious had happened straight away?
No,
When did you first realize the ship was in trouble?
until we got up and I met one of the stewards, Mr. Dodd, and he said, I said, what's wrong? He said, I don't know, but get up on deck. Everybody get up on deck, which we did. Then we didn't think it was serious.
You stayed on deck some time.
Yes, quite a while. And everybody was helping, all the stewards, and everybody was helping to put the people in the lifeboats. And one of the stewards gave me a baby to take care of. And we all waited in turn to get in the lifeboats. I never wanted to go because I didn't think it was possible that anything could. I felt I was safer on the deck of the ship. But she sank very quickly, and I was in the last lifeboat, which was lowered.
And then you how long you were at sea?
All night.
All night?
Yes, all night.
Right, go ahead. And then you went back to sea?
I did. And I made a Mediterranean cruise with the
Wonderful.
White Star.
Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Slocum.
Thank you.
I was in the steerage class, and I was in bed. And then a young man knocked on the door, and he told me there was some trouble with the ship. So I said, throw off my shoes, and I put them on me, because I thought all I had to
Mrs. Manning, where were you when the ship struck the iceberg?
in the steerage class.
You were emigrating to America?
Yes, I was coming over here to my sister.
If I may ask, how old were you then?
I was 16, going on 17, be 17 in October.
And when did you first realize how serious?
En el 1912 se hundió, ¿no? Yo creo que sí. Fijaros, esta entrevista es del 57. Tendrían que ser muy jóvenes estas personas.
The trouble was?
Oh, I didn't until I got to this country. I thought it was part of the trip, to tell you the truth. I didn't realize that there was any danger.
You didn't realize there was any danger?
No, I thought that was pretty hard way to get here, but I didn't really think it was as bad as it was until after.
When the alarm was sounded, what happened?
Well, I was asleep at the time, and I thought then the ship had landed. So I thought we were here in this country.
Then you went up on deck.
And then I went up on deck, and then we were told to go.
Esto es interesante. La mayoría de la gente estaba dormida y no se despertó. Si hubiese un choque contra un iceberg, menudo estruendo, ¿no? Menudo. Solo tuvo que retumbar todo el barco. Y si hubiese bombas, explosivos, pues también tuvo que oírse, ¿no? Así que ya me está pareciendo raro estas dos hipótesis de iceberg y de explosivos, porque la mayoría de gente estaba dormida y no se despertaron hasta que no sonaron las alarmas y iban avisando a la gente. ¿Qué puede ser? ¿Qué puede ser?
Down that there was a piece of ice on deck, and that when they get it off of it, everything would be all right. Go down and go to bed.
How did you escape?
Well, we were standing on the steerage, third class they call it, and then we couldn't get up to second. And of course, then there was one man with us, and he was our guardian angel, and he said, for God's sake, let the women up. So at that, I got up
And then you got,
second. Mm-hmm.
and then you got into a lifeboat.
No, then I had to go to first cabin. There lifeboats were only going from first cabin. So there was a man on the second deck, and he asked me to go on his shoulder, and I climbed over, and then I think it was the last boat that was going out.
Did you
They
take
didn't want to let me on because there was too many on the boat already.
But you got into the boat.
But I said to the man, I'd like to go with my sister because there was a neighbor with me, and I thought he'd feel it. Because I didn't want to lose the crowd. I didn't really think it was any danger, but I thought I'd miss them in the dark. You know, it was very dark.
Did you see the ship sink?
Oh, yes. I was looking at it sinking when we were in the lifeboat, because we were in the lifeboat for 9 hours.
And then which ship rescued you?
Carpathia. Carpathia picked us up then early in the morning, about 9 o'clock or something. I think it was about 9 o'clock in the morning.
Do you remember anything particularly of the scenes that night when you were in the lifeboat?
And that was the most terrific time of all. It was a shock, you know, for to hear the explosions. And when the boilers must have hit the water, I guess.
Hoy me está hablando de explosiones. Dice que supone que fueron las calderas cuando tocaron el agua. Bueno, ahí tenemos ya la palabra explosión, por lo menos.
And all the wreckage was falling in us, and we used to push it away, you know, from the boat so as we wouldn't sink, because we were really packed capacity in the boat, you know.
Did you rescue anyone from the water?
Oh, yes. We used to take dry ones from another boat, and they used to pick wet ones up then and put all the wet ones together in another boat so as that there wouldn't be.
Were there only women and children in your boat?
Oh, yes, there was women. There was women, and one man, he had jumped in with a raincoat and a towel on his head, and he used to help us row the boat, and we used to keep on taking directions from the men. There was a couple of men, I guess, on really directing the boats to go wherever the Carpathia was, you know.
Did you see the Titanic sending up rockets?
Oh, yes. They kept sending them up until the last minute. Kept going up all the time.
And did you hear the music playing?
Yes, yes.
Do you remember what they played?
Well, in our part, they were singing Near My God to Thee, but upstairs they were playing different songs, you know, but I didn't hear them then because I was rushing to get after the crowd that was with me. I didn't want to lose them in the dark. You see, it was dark at night, and you had to try to find your friends, you know.
And then when you were rescued in the Carpathia, you came on to America.
Yes.
And you've never been back to Ireland since?
Never back since.
You've never been to sea again?
No, never. I'd like to go but then I get the chills and I say, no, I won't.
Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Manning.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Manning, where were you when the iceberg struck the Titanic?
I was in the steerage, call it third class.
You were emigrating to America?
Yes, my sister's here.
And how old were you then, if I may ask?
I was 16, going to be 17 in October.
Right. Mrs. Manning, where were you when the iceberg struck the Titanic?
I was in the steerage, third class.
And you were emigrating to America?
Yes, sir.
And how old were you then, if I may ask?
I was 16.
And what do you chiefly remember of that night?
Well, I remember crying to get upstairs, to get to a lifeboat.
Bueno, parece que se repite ahí. Tuvo es una desgracia, ¿eh? Los otros testigos dicen que las hélices mataron a las personas. Un saludo a Kendra y a Alejandro, dos seguidores fieles ahí a Hierro. Un saludo para ellos y vamos a ver, a oír a otro testigo.
So I called everybody, picked up a book and walked forward to my stateroom, which was on the same deck, A11. And as I got in my stateroom, I switched on the electric light, and I noticed a slight jar, followed immediately by a second one, and a third one, which was quite strong enough to make me hold on to the bedpost. The boat came to a full stop. I walked forward to my window and saw a grayish-white mass drifting by. Very much surprised, and decided to take my fur coat and go out on deck and see what it was all about. Well, when I got out on deck, I noticed a gentleman standing by the rail and several people in a large, again, this grayish mass. I said, what on earth is that? That? Oh, madam, that's a lifeboat. That's an iceberg. Iceberg? Gracious, I've always wanted to see one of those things since I was a child. Well, you're seeing it Corker now. There's 1/8 above the water and 7/8 below. And believe me, that's some iceberg. So, after that, we picked up bits of ice, played snowballs for a little while, and it was very, very cold. I asked one of the officers if there was any danger. He said no, and I went back to bed.
As simple as that. No danger as far as you were concerned.
No danger.
Now, what about Mr. Witter, second-class smoking room steward? What did you think the Titanic had hit, Mr. Witter?
Well, I didn't think she'd hit anything. I thought she dropped a blade from the propeller, you know.
How did you find out what in fact had happened?
Well, I went down to the working alleyway where my cabin is, number 7 Glory Hole. I was standing there talking to 2 or 3 fellows, and Carpenter came along, and I heard him say, the bloody mailroom's full of water. I said, what's that ship, mailroom full of water? He said, yes. I said, well, what about those bulkhead doors forward? He said, they're not holding, Jim. Of course, then I walked into my cabin, number 7 Glory Hole, and I opened my box. I called everybody. I said, come along, fellas, get up. She's going down. So I opened my box, took out some matches, some cigarettes, and I said, come on, fellas, get out. What the hell are you talking about? They said, get out of here. And someone threw a boot at me. I said, good night, gentlemen. Just as easy as that.
As far as they're concerned, no danger either, not at that time. Well, now, Commander Lightoller, the second officer of the Titanic, died recently, but in 1936 he broadcast his story of that night. And it left 6 compartments open to the sea. The water flowed into the first 6 compartments forward of number 4 boiler room and caused her bows to sink so much that the water flowed over the top of the aftermost watertight bulkhead, filled the next compartment, then overflowed again into the next one, and so on. Well, from that moment, as the captain very well realized, nothing could save the Titanic, and the order was given, lower the boats. Quartermaster Rowe, who's here tonight, was a very surprised man. Where were you, Quartermaster?
I went on watch on the poop at 8 o'clock. At 10 o'clock, I read the log and passed it onto the fore bridge. At 20 minutes to 12, I was pacing up and down the deck, and I felt a good jar. I thought that was peculiar. I looked along the side.
El único que sintió una fuerte sacudida, de momento, ¿vale? Los demás no se enteraron. Dice que uno que si no se qué de la hélice, otro que no sé qué, pero ninguno sintió el impacto, ¿vale? De momento. Así que vamos a seguir, a ver.
I saw what I thought was a windjammer, but as it came astern, I saw it was an iceberg. The engine was going full speed astern then, so I pulled the lug in. After that, it got a bit quiet, except for the blowing off of steam, and heard nothing or see nothing till I saw a lifeboat being lowered on the starboard side. I reported it to the bridge. I asked them if they knew there was a boat being lowered. They said they did, and wanted to know who I was. I said I was the after quartermaster. They asked me if I knew where the distress rockets were. I said yes. They said bring them on the bridge. When Captain Smith saw me bring them up, he told me to fire one every 5 or 6 minutes. After about 2 or 3 minutes, he said to me, can you Morse? I said yes, a bit. He said, call that light up. Tell her where the Titanic's sinking. Please get all your boats ready. She never answered.
And that's your strange story, Quartermaster. Yeah. Just like that.
Just like that.
Now, what about a third-class passenger, Mr. Cohen? I think, Mr. Cohen, you'd had a bit of a celebration with the boys that night.
Yes, I did. We had a celebration with a glass of lemonade.
Am I supposed to believe that?
Yes, you was. So my belts do.
Did you get yourself a life belt earlier on in the proceedings?
No, not at the time. The reason was because we thought the Titanic was unsinkable.
When did you really believe at last that she was going down?
When the boat was listing. And then I decided to find a lifeboat. I found it very quickly. And then I went towards the lifeboats. I never had a chance to get in any one of them because the order was women and children first. So as I was 11, 19, I was out of it. So I decided to find my own salvation. I went across to the Devitt, climbed across the Devitt, which was a dangerous thing at Titanic, and went down the rope about 80 feet long and went into the water, into the sea runoff.
It sounds easy now, quick, doesn't it, when you tell it?
Yes, it does. But
I bet you wouldn't like to do it now.
No, well, not with this.
I don't know whether they can see you lower down. I don't think they can, but they can imagine.
Yes.
It's not as bad as they may think.
Yes.
Now, was that lifeboat that picked you up eventually, was it full?
No, it was about 25 people in it. The reason it was fairly empty as it was because the people on a boat never realized that the boat would sink. And not many people took the opportunity of going into the lifeboats.
A greater risk leaving the ship than staying
That's
aboard.
right, yes.
Let's ask Miss Russell to take up her story again, and let's jump in.
Algo interesante aquí, ¿no? Según dice este hombre, la mayoría de la gente, y como hemos visto los testigos anteriores, la mayoría de gente no sabía que el barco se hundía. Pero los que lo manejaban sí, vale. Es lógico que si sufres un impacto, pues, y vas a mirar, pues, vale, sí, que entra agua y que el barco se va a hundir, pero no tan rápido, ¿no? Entonces, ¿por qué prepararon los botes tan rápido? ¿Es que acaso no sabían ellos que se iba a hundir? Y de todas maneras, como se hundió tan rápido, pues no tuvieron tiempo de prepararlo todo bien, ¿no? Así que yo qué sé, yo no voy a afirmar nada, pero de momento parece ser que todo estaba planeado, según estamos viendo. Vamos a seguir.
Ahead in time. The last we heard from you, Miss Russell, you were going to bed. You decided to go to bed. Now, let's go forward to the time when you were on deck and you asked Wareham, your steward, to go and find your little pig, your mascot. Would you take it from there?
I was on A deck in the lounge when Wareham came along, and I said to him, "Here, Wareham, are my trunk keys. Would you mind taking care of my trunks if I don't get back in time in the morning?" So he said, "You better go in and kiss those trunks goodbye." I said, "You don't think there's any danger, do you? If there is, you better go back and get my mascot." My mascot was a little pig, a music box. It had been given to me by my mother after a motor accident fatal to everybody with me in France. So he brought the little pig back. He played the matchich. After that, I was in the direct line of light with Bruce Ismay, who saw me and picked me up like a puppy and threw me down the steps. But I was wearing a sheath dress, very narrow skirt, a long fur coat, a woolen cap, some furs, evening slippers, and one thing another, thin stockings. And I went forward to the rail, looked at that very, very high rail with the lifeboat swinging way out on its davits, and I knew I never could make it, not in that skirt. So as I stood there hesitating, a sailor grabbed this little pig from under my arm and said, "Well, if you don't want to be saved, we'll save your child." And he threw the pig into the lifeboat. Well, I stood there hesitating, and as I said to a gentleman alongside, "Should I leave?" He said, "Definitely, madam." Well, I said, "Can't make it." So now, if you will just sit on my hand, this sailor and I will make a little cradle of our hands. You sit down, put your hand around my neck, and we'll toss you right into the lifeboat. And they did. First thing I did then was to hunt for the little pig. I found it, the bottom of the boat with its legs broken, but it still could play the matchich, and I played it all night long to keep the children from crying.
Thank you, Miss Russell. Well, meantime, the entire crew and all the officers of the Titanic were working frantically. And in the wireless room, the chief radio officer, Jack Phillips, was trying to contact nearby ships. The nearest was the Californian, but her solitary operator had gone to bed. The officer of the watch reported the Titanic's rockets and the disappearance of her lights to the captain.
Bueno, también resulta un dato importante que fue por la noche cuando está todo el mundo dormido, ¿no? Si fuese por el día y todo el mundo viéndolo, pues no habría lugar a dudas, pero fue por la noche y todo el mundo dormido, es el escenario perfecto para hacer una trama, ¿no? Bueno, yo lo dejo ahí también eso.
but no action was taken. Meantime, Phillips from the Titanic was sending out the old CQD call, the standard distress signal of those times. But then he changed to SOS the first time it had ever been used at sea. And one of the ships to pick that up was the Carpathia, the captain, Captain Rostrom. Now, Harold Cottam, there he is, was the operator of the Carpathia, and he received the signal. And here he is, sending his answer now. Now, this equipment you're using now, Mr. Cottam, I understand is the same as in the Titanic, except for the buzzer that Marconi Marine supplied for the Titanic.
Yes,
is that not right?
Yes.
We've got the coil there,
Yes.
the tuning here,
Yes.
and the receiving.
Yes.
And there was the transmission, was it not?
Yes.
With the spark flying from
Yes.
the points when you press the buzzer.
Yes.
And here the charging and distributing apparatus.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Cottam, the Titanic called you in distress. What was your reaction?
Well, she didn't call me. I called her. About 1 o'clock in the morning, after I'd taken the press, or listened to the press, I took a batch of message for her, and with the intention of redirecting them on to her, I called her up. And the only reply I got that she'd struck ice. And I said, was it serious? And she said, yes, this is a CQD, old man. Here's the position, report it, and get here as soon as you can. So I took the position and on a scrap of paper and rushed up to the bridge with it. When I got on the bridge, I contacted the officer of the watch, and the information didn't seem as though it had sunk as fast as I thought it ought to. So I rushed down the ladder and knocked on the captain's cabin. And as I saw a light, I rushed in. And he said, "Who the hell?" or words to that effect. So I said, well, the Titanic struck ice, sir, and she's in distress. I've got the position here. So he said, well, give it me, and he put a dressing gown on and went. So he said, will you confirm this?
Vale, lo que estoy viendo es que sí, la mayoría dice que hubo un impacto contra el hielo, ¿vale? Entonces, muy probable que sí hubo un impacto contra un iceberg o contra un bloque de hielo, ¿no? Pero que ese bloque de hielo fuese el causante de la rotura del casco del Titanic, es que es muy difícil que un hielo rompa el acero, ¿no? Y todas las capas que lleva un barco, ¿no? Entonces, me pongo a pensar, cuando impactó contra el iceberg, es el momento justo cuando pudieron poner los explosivos. Yo lo dejo ahí, ¿vale? Aprovecharon el impacto contra el iceberg para que justamente hacer explotar los explosivos justo en el momento del impacto. Eso sí me parece más razonable y más probable, ¿vale? Y tuvo que ser si fuese una explosión, tuvo que ser casi abajo del todo, ¿vale? Y sí es probable que al hacer una explosión en la parte de abajo, todo el sonido se lo comería el mar, ¿no? Se lo comería el mar y entonces sí que la gente no se pudo dar cuenta de esa explosión. Yo lo estoy pensando ahora, ¿vale? Yo ya os digo que yo no puedo afirmar nada, pero por ahí podrían ir los tiros.
Go aft and confirm it if you can.
Which you did.
Yes, which I did.
And when you came back, what did he do?
When I came back, he said, well, you'd better go back and tell her that we're going to double bank all the watches on deck and below, and tell him we are
on our way.
On our way,
as fast as you could go.
Yes, as fast as you could go.
Fine, thank you, Mr. Cottam.
Yeah.
Well, the Carpathia was on its way, and back on the Titanic, the last lifeboat got away round about 1:20 in the morning, and it had over 60 people on board.
Fijaros, ahora ahí está hablando Alejandro en el chat, conflicto de intereses y tal, ¿vale? Sabemos lo de JP Morgan y todo eso, pero ¿sabéis ahora que me acabo de acordar? Que creo que no he visto ningún primado negativo diciendo que el Titanic fue una mentira. o que fue planeado, o que hubo una explosión o no. Ahora que me pongo a pensar, no hay, yo no he visto ningún primado negativo del Titanic. Si vosotros habéis visto alguno, decírmelo, ¿vale? Pero creo que no lo hay, ¿eh? Creo que no lo hay. Y me parece raro que no lo haya, porque ya veis de las Torres Gemelas, bueno, de todo siempre hay primado negativo, pero programación predictiva, pero en este caso primado negativo, porque no pudieron hacer programación predictiva. Así que es algo importante, ¿eh? Si no es primado negativo, es raro también, por lo menos en mi opinión.
From the boat, they watched the ship with husbands, relations, and friends still aboard, still unable to believe that she was doomed. Commander Lightoller was less than 100 yards away on the top of an upturned boat.
As I watched, I could see her bow getting deeper and deeper in the water, with the foremast sticking up above the surface, whilst her stern lifted higher and higher, till it was right out of the water. When she got to an angle of about 60 degrees, there was a sullen sort of rumbling roar, as her massive boilers all left their beds and went crashing down through the bulk's heads and everything that stood in their way.
Saludos a Java. Pues mira, nos cuenta que hay un libro premio que se llama Titán. Entonces, pues, probablemente sería la programación predictiva de aquella época. Pues hay que investigar, hay que intentar leer ese libro o por lo menos leer la descripción y a ver qué nos cuentan. Pues ya tenemos un dato de Java. Muchas gracias, Java. Hay que seguir investigando a ver.
Up to that moment, she had stood out as clear with her rows of electric lights all burning. When the boilers broke away, she was, of course, plunged into absolute darkness, though her huge black outline was still perfectly distinct up against the stars and sky. Slowly, she reared up on end, till at last she was absolutely perpendicular. Then, quite quietly, but quicker and quicker, she seemed just to slide away under the surface and disappear.
Bueno, vamos a ver otro superviviente o otra superviviente.
Don't forget, we had 16.
Vamos a ver este hombre.
There was no impact as such. It was just like jamming your brakes on a car. And
Otro más. Los supervivientes nos cuentan que no hubo impacto, pero los comandantes, los que mandaban en el barco, sí, ¿vale? Eso ya es raro. Y los supervivientes, todos los que hemos visto ahora, dicen que no hubo un impacto.
And that was that. She stopped. We had a porthole open, and I looked out, and the sky was clear, the stars were shining, the sea was dead calm. And I thought, I don't know, I couldn't understand it. So I came out of my cabin, and I thought, well, I go forward. And I went forward to the well deck on the starboard side, and I could see ice in the well deck. There's no sign of iceberg then, because she'd passed us. And the lights were shining on the water from the portholes. No sign of damage above waterline. And of course, what had happened, we slipped over the iceberg. And although she was supposed to be unsinkable with a double bottom, the iceberg had cut her from forward on the starboard side to the engine room, almost amidships, right through her two bottoms. And we had orders to get the lifeboats out. And of course the order, the same old order, women and children. And we swung the lifeboats out and gradually filled them up. First boats were away on the port side. The first boats away didn't have many passengers on board. They were afraid to go down. There was a 70-foot drop to the water. And they didn't think she was going to sink. And a few of the first boats on the port side got away with half filled. Don't forget, we had 16 lifeboats, and they each carried 50. And if they'd been filled, we could have saved 800, whereas we only saved 500. So you can imagine there were many seats in the first lifeboats vacant. Then I had orders to go down the storeroom with a gang of men and get all the biscuits we could find. Well, when we got back up onto the boat deck, we couldn't get near the lifeboats. Some people were scrambling to get in and being pushed back. By that time, she was listing very badly to port, and we couldn't get the starboard boats down. But before I got my lifebelt on, I met a young couple, and I can tell you her name. It was Mrs. Clark. They'd spent their honeymoon in France, and we'd picked them up at Cherbourg. And she was having trouble with her lifebelt. So I fixed that on to her. And I said, I think you'd better get into a lifeboat. And there was one in the port, on the port side. So she said, no, I don't want to go there. I don't want to leave my husband. So I said, well, it's just precautionary measure. You get in, your husband will follow later on. And I got her away, and that was that. And then I picked up my own lifeboat and put it on. Well, things went then, and then the third-class passengers were coming up. There were 700 of them, and they swarmed the decks and filled up the decks. And I thought, well, I'd done all I possibly could. I'd helped them all I could. And I thought, well, now I'll go up and get out of all this scrumming and go on the poop deck. And she was sinking fast then. And all of a sudden, she lifted up quickly, and you could hear everything crashing through her. Everything that was movable was going through her. And then she went down and seemed to come up again. So I thought, well, now I'm going to leave. And I was hanging on to a board. We had two boards, starboard and port, which said, keep clear of propeller blades. And I was hanging on to one of these, and I was getting higher and higher in the air. And I thought, well, now I'll go. And I dropped in. I had a lifebelt on. And I hit the water with a terrific crack. Luckily, I didn't hit anything when I dropped in. There were bodies all over the place. And then I looked up at the Titanic. So the propellers were right out of water. The rudder was right out, and I could see the bottom. And then gradually she glided away, and that was that. That was the last of the Titanic. I didn't want to die. I mean, I didn't see much chance of living, but I was gradually getting frozen up. And by the grace of God, I came across a lifeboat, and they pulled me in. And there was a fireman dead in the bottom, and there was about a foot of water in this boat. There was another man who he seemed to be trying to get away from it again. I don't know what was the matter with him. They were tying him down. And the rest were women and children. And I sat on a seat, and I sat next to Mrs. Clark, the girl I'd put into a lifeboat. And she said, the first thing she said, have you seen my husband? So I said, no, I haven't. I expect he'll be all right. Anyway, I was pretty bad way then, as you can imagine, frozen solid almost. And she wrapped me round with a cloak. She had some sort of blanket or a coat on. Anyway, I think she probably saved my life. I don't know. But I saved hers. At least I think I might have done. I think I did. And she saved mine.
I believe you've even got a watch that you were wearing at the time when you went into the water.
Yes, yes. Oh, but it's only an old gunmetal watch. But I couldn't afford anything better in those early days. Here it is. This one.
What does it show us? That says 2:20. What time was it when you went into the water, do you think?
I think about 2 o'clock. I think it lasted. It was frozen up like I was. I think it lasted for about 20 minutes in the water.
Does talking about this incident bother you like you have been today?
Talking about it? I should probably dream of that tonight. Have another nightmare. You think I'm...
Hostia puta, es que fue una tragedia, pero de verdad, ¿eh? Eso no lo podemos ni imaginar lo que fue eso. Madre mía. Se va a acabar ya y voy a poner a otro, ¿vale?
Too old for that, but you'd be amazed. You lie in bed at night and the whole thing comes round again.
Uf, esto es una historia fuerte, 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 de verdad.
Artículo 3.
Vamos a ver.
Cabins. I put this on, not securely, and I was walking aimlessly on deck, thinking what I should do next. And looking over the side, I saw the boats being launched for the survivors, and it was Women Children first, so I had no chance there. And while I was looking over the side of the boat, one of the crew in the lifeboat shouted out to me to jump. Well, I didn't actually jump off the boat. I crawled across the davits, came down the falls, dropped in the water, and I was picked up with a boat that returned to pick me up.
A little while later, a man came to my door. His teeth were chattering. He said, "Madam, get up, get out. You know, they're making the women and children leave in lifeboats. They say you're coming back for breakfast. You know, these crazy English, they do anything. They make you get up and go off in boats and go off and come back for breakfast. What do you think of that?" But before I went, I locked every window in my 3 staterooms and closed every trunk and locked every trunk and took the keys with me. 19 keys for 19 trunks. I had on my evening slippers, diamond buckles. No, not real diamonds, but diamond. And I had a wool cap and 2 fox furs and a paper-thin broadtail coat and no underwear and no stockings, but a pair of velvet slippers and these buckles. And I lost a buckle. And who should I see? Mr. Mock, a miniature painter. And he said, "Look, there's trouble." I said, "No." Well, he said, "You'll have to jump now into the lifeboat." I said, "Jump? With this thing I've got on? What do you think I am, an acrobat or a monkey or something? I can't jump in this thing." Well, he said, "You'll have to. My sister's in that lifeboat." Well, I looked at that lifeboat, swinging out on the davits. Possibly, I don't know by measurements, but it was an awful long way. And down below was the sea, 14 stories below. What if you jumped and you fell between? No. I never would have left the ship. But a sailor came along and he said, "Say you don't want to be saved. Well, I'll save your baby." And he grabbed this pig from under my arm and he tossed it in the lifeboat. And I turned to this man Monk and I said,
Esta es la de antes, pero claro, aquí se ve mejor. Vamos a poner otra, que vamos mal de tiempo. Vamos a poner otro superviviente. Había una mujer que contaba un relato jodido, que vio a la gente morir con las hélices, ¿vale? Lo voy a buscar por el móvil mientras pongo otro, ¿vale? Creo que es esta, ¿vale? Es esta.
Only a few hundred passengers survived the sinking, and only a handful of those are still alive to see the pictures of the ship as it is now. One of them is Eva Hart. This was Eva with her parents just 3 weeks before they boarded the Titanic. They were on their way to a new home in Winnipeg. They never made it. But Eva survived and still carries vivid memories of that night. We reached Eva Hart at her home in Chadwell Heath, near London. Miss Hart, what was your reaction? What went through your mind when you found out that the Titanic had been found?
Oh, well, of course, my immediate reaction was that I, just as it always has been, and I hope they would never raise the Titanic. Because to me, just as a very ordinary individual, it is my father's grave, and I would rather it were left untouched. But today's wonderful news of this tremendously scientific effort makes me realize that if that sort of skill can possibly in the future do marvelous things for these matters, well then of course I accept that it probably will be done.
Your memories of that night must be very clear.
They are indeed.
Can you tell us something about what happened?
Well, you know quite well what happened. The ship struck an iceberg, and I, like all 7-year-old children, of course, was in bed and asleep. But my mother wakened me, and my father took me, went with my mother, and took me and placed me in a lifeboat, and my mother, and made no attempt to get in herself. But I...
Otra vez lo mismo, una niña dormida que no se despertó del impacto, se despertó porque sus padres los avisó, ¿vale? Es que encontramos el mismo patrón de repetición. La mayoría de gente dormida y no se despertaron del impacto y los despertó la gente que iba avisando por las habitaciones, ¿vale? Y posteriormente se hunde el barco muy rápido. Es que suena a plan total, ¿no? Suena a plan totalmente.
I really do owe the good fortune of my living to the fact that my mother had a tremendous premonition of disaster from the first time that she knew she was going in the Titanic.
Really?
And she said that to say that a ship was unsinkable, which is what the whole world was saying, to say that was flying in the face of God. And she begged of my father not to go. But when we finally went, she said, well, I shall not go to bed at night in that ship. I shall sit up at night and I shall sleep in the daytime. And that's exactly what she did.
That's
and
remarkable.
So because she was wide awake, we got on deck in plenty of time to get into one of the all too few lifeboats. So I feel I owe my life to that premonition.
But your father did not get in the lifeboat. Why was that?
Why?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know the rule of the sea, don't you? Women and children first. No man is going to take the place of a woman or child.
And by the time the women and children were in that lifeboat, it was full.
Absolutely.
What happened then?
Well, we rowed away from the ship as fast as we possibly could, of course. And then it was discovered that the boat that I was in was very much overcrowded. And so the boats were all called together and people would put one in another boat and two in another boat if there was room. And in that transshipment, I got separated from my mother, which was quite terrifying.
You were separated from your mother?
I met her the next day, of course, aboard the Carpathia. She thought that I'd been dropped in the sea when I was put over the side of the boat. And I was too terrified to know what had happened. I didn't even think about it. All I knew was that she wasn't there, which was quite terrifying.
What did you see as you rowed away from the ship?
All I could see was the sinking ship.
Mm-hmm.
It was a terribly dark night. Starlit, but no moonlight. And this tremendous ship, which didn't sink for over 2 hours. Horrible sight. Dreadful sight.
Did you see the iceberg?
Yes, I did. It was the other side of the ship from where we were, but as we rowed away and we looked back at the ship, we could see the iceberg, so to speak, behind it. That's the only way I can describe it. It was very lovely.
Está buena la que dice Alejandro. ¿Por qué la mayoría de la gente estaba tan adormecida? ¿Cuál fue el menú de la noche? Fijaros, es buena, ¿eh? Suministraron algún tipo de calmante somnífero para que la gente tuviese un sueño más profundo y no escuchase las explosiones o el impacto. Buena, Alejandro, buena.
Large.
Were you old enough to know at the time what was happening to your father?
Oh, yes, of course. I was devoted to my father. I knew quite well I'd never see him again.
Would you like to know now who was at fault for the disaster? Would you like to know anything more about what happened, or does it matter anymore?
It doesn't matter anymore. I know what the fault was. The fault was that that ship was allowed to go to sea with too few lifeboats. And therefore, those 1,513 people who died that night need not have died. And it took a disaster like that to make the Board of Trade alter their regulations, which now says, of course, that you cannot go to sea without you taking enough lifeboats for everyone. But it took a disaster.
La muerte más importante fue la de J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan cascó. Esa es la más importante.
Like that to bring that into being.
Because nothing is unsinkable.
Absolutely.
Miss Hart, thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Bueno, yo la que decía era esta.
Or the orchestra that was playing.
Pero no tiene vídeo y es más larga, ¿vale? Vamos a ver unos fragmentos.
All sorts of queer things have happened, and you feel, well, it's nothing to do with me. Well, how do you know it's nothing to do with you? Perhaps it is, you know,
Yeah.
something, and it's quite queer.
I think what's important too, and this is my theory, and one of the things I propose to discuss in the book, that particularly on the Titanic, that those who had a job to do, like the two pantry boys with a sack full of sovereigns, or Andrews and the deck steward, for instance, I don't know, they were throwing over bundles of deck chairs over the side, or the gym instructor within the gym showing people how to work the bicycles, even as the ship was sinking, or the orchestra that was playing. All those people who had jobs to do and somehow felt more comforted doing something. In both cases, you, as a stewardess, in the first case on the Titanic, you comforted a woman passenger who was afraid to get into the lifeboat.
Vale. Corregimos datos, ¿vale? Gracias, Ava, aquí por el chat. J.P. Morgan no murió en el Titanic. Él organizó el viaje y en el último momento nos subió, ¿vale? Así que dato importante y perdonar, ¿vale? Yo no sé, yo lo leí por ahí, pero me confundí, ¿vale? Pero bueno, ya sabemos que fue organizador y no subió. Entonces, da mucho que decir, ¿vale?
Your arm around her.
It made such a difference. You know, she brightened up at once. She sort of put herself into my care.
Well, because that was your job, taking care of
I suppose it was,
And then you took care of the baby. And then you took care of the mess boy on the Britannic.
Yes.
Again, you felt at the time that what made you feel, I'm sure, less afraid was that you got on with the job.
It was that, because I had the same experience when I was down nursing with that photograph taken, because just before the Britannic, I was down nursing in Broadstairs, where Prime Minister lives, and it was a lovely little hospital, but we were very short-staffed, and there was one boy there. He was he had about 18 wounds in his arm. His arm should have come off, but they tried to save it. And he suffered terribly. And 18 tubes had to go into his arm twice a day.
To drain
it. And I mean, I knew matron detailed me to look after him. Well, I had to look after him day and night. He had to be dressed at night, which meant that I had to, because he was bad there and they were afraid of losing that arm, I had to get up every 2 hours. Well, when you're young and tired, it's an awful job.
Yeah.
And you know that boy, although it must be agony, he scarcely ever made a motion because he'd asked that nobody was going on, and he had 3 propellers.
Vale, perdonar, esta era una enfermera que estuvo en el Titanic y en el Britannic, ¿vale? Esta es la que os digo que vio a la gente morir por las hélices y tal, ¿vale? La verdad es que es sobrecogedor. Esta entrevista es más larga, ¿vale? Y si la queréis ver, ahora voy a poner el canal donde están subidas estas entrevistas, y luego también entrevistas de los comandantes y tal, que son más largas. Voy a poner un poco de ellas, pero ya sabéis que si no el vídeo dura 2 o 3 horas, ¿vale?
You see?
She was already tipping out. The propellers were out of the water.
No, she was on an even keel.
Right.
She wasn't even.
I see.
She was. That's the thing. She wasn't even.
The largest ship in the world at that time. And let us hear now what happened.
Well, I was left alone, you see, and I decided which would it be better to be, cut the pieces or drown. I mean, I had to make the decision. If I stayed in the boat, she was being drawn, you see. Then it's wonderful how, even at a distance, that those 3 propellers could draw.
Right.
And I could feel her going over, and I thought, well, now,
which is it?
Drowning is not as bad as being cut to pieces. And doing it cold-bloodedly, too.
So you went over the side?
I went over the side.
Did you have a life jacket on?
I did something, John, that I always, if your mother, well, I don't suppose I took up a boat drill, but I was always very, very strict, you know.
Strict with your passengers?
Oh, terribly.
Yeah.
Now, don't put on a life vest unless you know that you mustn't put it on over clothes. I mean, jackets and that.
Right.
Put it on as near to your body as
Right.
possible.
Right.
And they used to say, you're awfully strict on boat drill.
You had good reason to be.
Well, anyway, on this trip, I was hoping to see my brother, and for that reason, I took all my best clothes. Although it was only your brother, you always like to be very smart.
Sure.
And I had this lovely coat. Well, instead of putting the coat over the lifebelt, I put the lifebelt over the coat. A thing I never allowed a passenger. I'd have killed a passenger if they did that. And so when I went into the water, I went down miles with the weight of, clothes, and came up under the boat. And to begin with, I got a terrible blow on the head, which you may think is the reason for me behaving as I am today, and will give you some food and talking too much. But I got a terrific bang on the head.
Mm-hmm.
And, it did occur to me, if I get another like that, I'll be finished.
Mm-hmm.
Not panicking, but just thought.
Registered in your mind.
Yeah.
Right.
You keep.
Yeah.
I won't let go, so I let go. I met that man after. He was telling the story. Like, he panics.
Joder, esta chica es la más... lo cuenta riéndose. Esta chica es súper fuerte mentalmente. Joder.
Because he could feel this strong hand, and then I opened my hand and let go.
Yeah.
And he was a little red-haired, what do you call it, orderly.
Yeah.
In the orderly corps.
Medical
orderly, you see. And he was telling his mate when I heard him say, and he said, strong grip. And he said, then suddenly let go. And I said, that was me. And he looked at me because he'd heard I'd been, in the water. And I thought of myself, what a grand thing that I let go. He's a lovely little chap.
Yeah.
But what a terrible thing, I'd been killed and
dragged him with you. But you came up all right after you let
go. Yes,
go.
I came up all right. And, sort of floated. But the only thing, of course, that nearly absolutely killed me was the first thing that was quite near me. when I turned round, was an open human head.
Mm.
Just
Somebody hit the propeller, probably.
yes, I mean, and the thing that, of course, it would come to your mind, it reminded me when my father used to kill a sheep, you know, and a sheep's head.
Yeah.
I never saw anything so dreadful. And you could tell from the collar that he was a young and lovely person, you know,
Yeah.
a young, it was a soldier, whatever, the Red Cross man. But I floated about. I carried 4 life belts floating around. Because I don't swim, you see. I've never learned to swim. And so...
you swallowed a lot of water.
Oh, talk about... For years afterwards, I could feel that cork.
Yeah.
You know, your mouth full of cork, and, you know, if you're wretched, you brought up cork. And...
this was the cork insulation from the ship.
Yes, from the ship. And you see the oil, too.
Yeah.
But presently, I heard a noise, and a young man who was partly submerged called out, and he must have seen it. I didn't see it. Saw the life, one of our launchers come towards him. And he called out, "There's a woman in the water." And then I looked over to see him, and the poor thing, our on board medical, not the ship's company, but the head, he was a man who was very much disliked, the head of this officer, and he was standing up in the boat, and he called, this young fellow called out, and he asked to be picked up. He said, "Wait your turn." And I think I hated that man from that moment. Well, I need to say, fancy anybody. And he said, "I've lost my arm, sir." Well, he said, "Wait your turn." And he was standing up in his room.
Vale, pues después de ver a esta enfermera tan optimista y tan luchadora, vamos a ver el relato de un comandante, ¿vale? Es largo, pero bueno, vamos a ver qué dice. Yo no lo he visto, así que vamos a ver qué dice. Un oficial. O comandante, ¿no?
I went on watch at 8 o'clock on that Sunday night, the 14th of April, along with Moody, who was the 6th officer, and we went on the bridge with Mr. Murdoch, the 1st officer. It was a clear night. There was no signs of any fog. A set of stars was handed over to me that...
Importante. Era una noche clara, no había signo de niebla. ¿Qué nos cuentan? Es que no se podía ver por la niebla y por eso impactó con el iceberg, porque no se le vio a lo lejos y por eso chocó, ¿no? Aquí ya tenemos una contradicción, no sé, por el momento.
A set of stars was handed over to me that Lightoller had taken in the 2nd dog watch. When I got these stars, I said, "Now, Moody, you go around the decks and come back at 9 o'clock. I don't know whether the captain came up before 9 o'clock or after 9 o'clock, but anyway, I didn't leave the bridge until after 10 o'clock, having worked the stars out, and when the captain came up, I showed him the position on the chart. She was just over 20 miles ahead of the dead reckoning. And at 10 o'clock, I told Moody to take over the bridge, and I reported to the 1st officer that I was going round the decks. It was a customary thing. At the time when the iceberg was reported from the crow's nest, when they struck the bells, I was sitting in my cabin having a cup of tea, and immediately got up and walked along to the bridge, about 60 feet away on the same deck. I was about halfway between the officers' quarters, the entrance to the officers' quarters and the bridge, when the crash came. And it didn't break my step. She was doing full speed, and it didn't break my step. And I got to the bridge, and the captain had evidently arrived about the same moment. And I heard him say to Murdoch, what's the matter? What have you stuck? He said, we've stuck an iceberg, sir. He said, I'm going full speed astern, sir, on the port engine. He swung her head round towards port, and she was on the swing. And that's why she was torn underneath. She was penetrated in 6 compartments. Well, whilst the captain was talking to Murdoch at the starboard wing of the bridge, I slipped down to go forward and have a look to see if I could find any damage. Nobody told me to go. You had to go down about 4 bridge ladders, you see. And I went forward to the entrance to the 3rd class. These 3rd class passengers, Southern European people, were streaming up on deck. And I went down below. I think it was 2 decks down, as low as I could go without removing any hatches or anything. I went down to the 3rd class, crossed over to the starboard side, and I walked along there and looked in the cross passages. I couldn't hear any noise. I couldn't see any damage. And I eventually came up on deck again. As I was emerging on the deck, some of these men were on their way back again to their beds. And there was one man had a piece of ice, and I took it away out of his hands, wondering where he got it from. And I spoke to him in English and tried to make him understand that it was nothing, there was nothing the matter. Go down and go to bed and go to sleep again, you see. And I took this piece of ice and walked along the upper side to see where the ice came from. And there, just inside of the ship's rail, there was a powdering of ice running along as though she'd compressed it. There was no wind, you see, and it would fall inboard. I came up onto the bridge again and reported to the captain, I've been down below, sir, right down as far as I could go without removing hatches or tarpaulins or anything, right through the 3rd class accommodation forward. And I don't see any signs of any damage, not even a glass port broken. He said, did you see the carpenter anywhere, Mr. Boxall? I said, no, sir, I didn't. He said, I do wish you would go down and find him and tell him to sound the ship round for and let me know right away. Well, I didn't get down all the ladders down to the foredeck. I met the carpenter coming up, absolutely out of breath. And he said, Mr. Boxall, he said, the forepeak hatch is blown off and number 1 tarpaulin is ballooning up. He said, she's evidently making water fast. So I said, all right, go along, carpenter. The captain is on the starboard wing of the bridge and tell the captain. I didn't get down to the foredeck because I met a mail clerk coming up. And he said, Mr. Boxall, the mail room's filling. So I said, oh, carry on and you'll find the captain on the starboard wing of the bridge and report to him. I said, I'll go down there and have a look. So I continued on my way down to the mail room. I tried to go into the 1st class entrance from that lower deck, from the foredeck. But they'd got the watertight door closed. I had to come up all these ladders and go up over the promenade deck and then down through the main saloon entrance, where I found the band was beginning to tune up. And I got my way down to the mail room, and I got down as far as the sorting room. And all the mail clerks were there pulling letters out of the racks. And I was standing on the top of a companionway from the sorting room down to the handing room. And I saw a bag floating by. I instinctively stooped down to try and pick it up. I just couldn't reach it. I realized then that it was serious. So I started to come back again. When I got to the 1st class passenger accommodation, I met one of the assistant stewards. And he said, Mr. Boxall, shall I send some men down there? I said, I think you'd better not. I'll go up and report this to the bridge, and we'll send down and let you know. As I came up through the top lounge where the band was, they were playing Alexander's Ragtime Band. And I got back to the boat deck and saw the captain. And I told him, I said, the mailroom's filling, sir. Should I send a distress signal? And the captain said, I've already sent a distress signal. What position did you send it from? He said, from the 8 o'clock DR. Well, I said, she was about 20 miles ahead of that, sir. If you like, I will run the position up from the star position up to the time of the contact with the iceberg. And because I said she was about 20 miles ahead of her position, amended this position and took it on to the wireless room. And Phillips, the wireless operator, was bending over his instrument, the telephone, holding the telephone. He says, I'm in contact with the Carpathia. Well, I put the amended position down on the desk and I said, now send that amended position. Do you understand? He said, yes. Well, I said, send that off right away. And that was the position that the Carpathia came to. And I worked on the boat covers, taking off the boat covers on the boat deck, when I heard the crow's nest report a light on the starboard bow. Well, I went on the bridge right away. I found this light with my own glasses, but I wanted the telescope to define what it was. And I realized then that it was two mast headlights of a steamer below the horizon. And the lights were very close, and I went back and told the captain, there's a steamer in sight, very nearly ahead, but slightly on the starboard bow. And if she continues on our course, she'll pass close to us down the port side. Oh, I asked the captain, shall I send up some distress rockets? Then we started sending off these distress rockets, the quartermaster and I on the bridge. But I never knew how many I had fired. I knew very well that there was some in the box. The box holds a dozen, and when I told the captain, I said, there are still some in there, sir, but I don't know how many I fired. I didn't see any reply. Some of the passengers that was on the bridge said that they did see a reply. We also called up this ship as she drew closer with a Morse lamp, a very powerful Morse lamp that we had. And eventually, this steamer approached and approached until you could see all our lights with a naked eye. And I should say that she must have been within 5 miles off. You could not only see her lights with a naked eye, but you could see the lights in her portholes. So I reckon that she must have been within 5 miles. And then eventually she turned away and showed a stern light. And about that time, the captain came across the bridge and said, Mr. Boxall, you go away in that boat, pointing to the port emergency boat number 2. And he said, hurry up, Mr. Wilde is waiting to lower it. So I said, you see that white light over there? So pointing it out to him, he said, yes. I said, that is the stern light of that ship. I tumbled into this boat. They'd started to lower her. I tumbled into this lifeboat and we got lowered down. I found that I only had 3 of the ship's crew, a steward, a cook, and a sailor. She had been lowered very slowly. She wouldn't run until you helped the falls, and eventually became waterborne. I tried to count the passengers, but it was difficult as they didn't speak English, you see. And I reckon that I had between 30, around about 30 on board the boat. And the captain looked over the side from the bridge and sung out and told me to go round to the starboard side, to the gangway doors, which was practically opposite side to where I was lowered. I had great difficulty in getting the boat round there. There was suction. I was using the stroke oar, standing up, and there was a lady helping. She was steering the boat round the ship's stern. When I passed round the boat, try and get to this gangway door on the starboard side, her propellers were out of water. I'm not certain if I didn't pass underneath them. But when I did eventually reach there, I found that there was such a mob standing in the gangway doors. Really, I daren't go alongside, because if they'd jumped, they would have swamped the boat. She was only a small boat, would hold about 35 people. No buoyancy tanks in her at all. Boat that was always turned out, ready for emergency purposes like man overboard. However, I decided that it was not, that I daren't go alongside again. And I pulled off and laid off until I pulled away about a quarter of a mile, I suppose. And I couldn't, what struck me as being strange, that all the other boats, I couldn't see one of them. Long before I left the bridge, a telephone message had come through from the first officer who was aft. He'd been lowering all the starboard boats, and he'd told the quartermaster aft to report to the bridge that all the starboard boats had gone. That's a long time before I left the ship. Well, those boats must have pulled around to the port side, which was really the south side. And I was on the starboard side, on the north side of the ship, all alone. I couldn't see a boat anywhere. That is when I burnt the green light to try and attract the other boats, but I never found them. The sea was perfectly smooth when we left the ship. Every star in the heavens was visible, but there was no moon. So it was dark. And, well, everything was very peaceful, no wind, and no moon, stars, smooth water, until after about an hour, the wind got up and there was a little sea. For a long time, we didn't move the boat when we laid off on the starboard side. You could see by the arrangements of the lights, all the lights were burning, and you could see that she was going down. You could see that her stern was getting pretty low in the water. She was certainly going down. There was no doubt about it then. And well, we got away clear of the ship, and we just laid on the oars and until eventually they realized that she'd gone, and we heard all the screams. We couldn't do anything. And the screams went on for some considerable time. I can't remember the time when she sank, but it was in the early hours. I didn't see any ice whilst I was in the boat, but I could hear there was a little breeze sprang up before we got to the Carpathia, and I could hear the water on the ice, field ice or whatever it was. But I never saw any ice until after we'd been picked up by the Carpathia. Eventually, we saw a rocket go up, and it turned out to be the Carpathia. So she'd seen my green light that I had burnt. So I burnt another one. And eventually, she steered for the position that I was in. And consequently, I was the first boat picked up. People on the Carpathia told me that it was about just before 4 o'clock, about 5 minutes to 4, I think. I got alongside there. Everything was ready. Derricks was hoisted. Derrick falls had bowlines in them, and there was ladders over the side. Absolutely everything had been done that was possible to be done. And The captain kept sending down to know if there was an officer in the boat and send him up at once. But I sent a message back, when I get the boat empty, then I'll come up. I've only got one sailor in the boat. And eventually the boat emptied, and then I went up to the Captain Rostron on the bridge. And he said, where's the ship? I said, she's sunk. And I said, I don't know where the other boats are. I've not seen any of them. But they'll be all to the southward of us somewhere. And it was daylight eventually before any boats were sighted. And it was nearly 8 o'clock, I think. As near as I can remember, it was certainly broad daylight when we picked up the other boats. We cruised around in the Carpathia then. And eventually picked up all the other boats. And some of them were hoisted and left in their davits, and some were turned in and put on the deck. We steamed over the ground in the daylight. The Californian, she appeared. I don't remember seeing any other ships. The captain was going to put his officers on watch and watch. So we Titanic officers, the juniors, that was Moody and Pittman and I, we went on watches. We took soundings because we got fog all the way into New York.
Bueno, pues como veis, raro de que este oficial no se enteró de que habían impactado contra un iceberg, ¿no? Y bueno, pues este es el canal, ¿vale? Que ha subido los vídeos. Lo vi ayer. 19 vídeos, Titanic, la historia desconocida. Por aquí tenéis otro oficial del Titanic, Charles Stoller. Y bueno, pues algún vídeo más de alguna testigo, ¿no? Y nada, pues hasta aquí el directo de hoy. Si os interesa más este tema, ya sabéis, buscar más vídeos de este canal. Tenemos que investigar la novela, el libro que dice Java, que se publicó antes de este naufragio, porque puede haber claves, ya os digo, que me parece muy raro que no haya primado negativo. Parece ser que hubo programación predictiva en una obra literaria, pero me sigue pareciendo raro que no saquen primado negativo de esto, o en Los Simpsons, o en alguna serie o alguna película famosa, ¿vale? Sería muy fácil de ver, sería famoso, ¿no? Ya todo el mundo tendría ese primado negativo, pues diciendo, pues el Titanic fue una conspiración y hubo explosivos, o fue de tal manera o de tal manera. Y ya os digo que no, ahora yo que recuerde, no hay ningún primado negativo famoso del Titanic, porque ya os digo que ya estuviese sacado, que lo hubiese estuviese sacado en algún lado, ¿vale? Así que, pues nada, vamos a seguir investigando. Si encontramos más pruebas, estoy deseando leer la novela, como dice Mari, de ese Titan, de esa novela que al parecer pudo ser programación predictiva. Y vamos a seguir investigando. Si encontramos primado negativo, ya sí que sería la hostia, porque ya sabéis que bueno, que estamos hartos de ver lo de las Torres Gemelas, lo de bueno, todos estos eventos catastróficos, siempre primado negativo. Así que nada, un saludo Alejandro, Kendra, Java, todos los que habéis estado. Me voy a despedir poniendo el vídeo del capitán, del famoso vídeo del capitán. Y venga, hasta la próxima.